Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Edward III and we've made it out of Act 2, Scene 1. We're in Act 2, Scene 2 now, but we still get to hear from King Edward III because he talks a lot in this play. I mean, the play's title is his name. He's entitled to talk a lot if he wants to. So if you remember from the very beginning of this play, King Edward found out that he is likely the rightful heir to the French throne. So he had gotten some of his guys to go and muster up an army so he can fight France, while he went off to deal with the Scottish threat that turned out to not actually be a threat because the Scottish army turned tail and ran as soon as they saw the English army coming. But while he was there, he sort of fell in love with the Countess of Salisbury. And when he expressed his feelings to her, she was like, "No, you're married to somebody and I'm married to somebody." And when he expressed his feelings to her, she was like, "No, you're married to somebody and I'm married to somebody, so that's going against God. No, I want no part of that." So then he got her dad, Warwick, to try to convince her to be with him, which Warwick very begrudgingly tried, but the Countess of Salisbury was still like, "No, not touching that one with a 10-foot pole." And Warwick was like, "Phew, I raised my daughter right." And that brought us to the end of Act 2, Scene 1. So at the beginning of Act 2, Scene 2, where we are today, we have the Earl of Derby and the Lord of Audley, who are a couple of the guys that were supposed to go muster armies, and they get back together and they're like, "So how did you do? So how did you do?" And they've been able to muster a fairly sizable army, including getting the support of the Emperor. And they're like, "Whoa, what did the king say when he found out that the Emperor was backing him?" And they're like, "Well, I haven't gotten to tell him yet." And fortunately, right then, Edward III walks in. But he's still thinking about the Countess of Salisbury. He's not thinking about war right now. So as they are telling him, "You have the support of the Emperor," he's like, "Yeah, but I don't have the love of the Countess of Salisbury." He keeps having these little asides about his love life instead of paying attention to the war that they're trying to put together, to the point where he actually makes a bit of a Freudian slip at one point, and he's like, "Oh, just tell him I'll know the Countess's mind later." And they're like, "Countess?" And he's like, "Emperor, tell him I'll know the Emperor's mind later." And they're like, "Okay." And they decide that they should probably just leave him to his thoughts. So they exit the stage, and the king has a brief moment where he talks about how distracted he is by the Countess, but there's not really anything he can do about it. And then Lodovick comes in and he's like, "What's the word? What's the word?" And Lodovick says, she'll give us some sort of answer by tonight. And then a drum sounds because, they're calling people to war, a sort of a drum march, call to action, whatever. And King Edward III says, "What drum is this that thunders forth this march to start the tender Cupid in my bosom? Poor sheepskin, how it brawls with him that beateth it. Go break the thundering parchment bottom out, and I will teach it to conduct sweet lines unto the bosom of a heavenly nymph, for I will use it as my writing paper, and so reduce him from a scolding drum to be the herald and dear counsel bearer betwixt a goddess and a mighty king. Go bid the drummer learn to touch the lute, or hang him in the braces of his drum, for now we think it an uncivil thing to trouble heaven with such harsh resounds. Away!" "The quarrel that I have requires no arms, but these of mine, and these shall meet my foe in a deep march of penetrable groans. My eyes shall be my arrows, and my sighs shall serve me as the vantage of the wind to whirl away my sweetest artillery. But alas, she wins the son of me. For that is she herself, and thence it comes that poets term the wanton warrior blind. But love hath eyes as judgment to his steps, till too much loved glory dazzles them." How now? So the first part of this, he's annoyed that the call to war is happening while he's thinking about the Countess of Salisbury. So he's like, I'm going to take that drum and I'm going to write my poetry on it to woo her with. But then he gets so irritated with the drummer that he sends Lodovick off to get the drummer to stop. He's like, go, just make him stop. And while he's by himself, he equates his wooing of the Countess of Salisbury to fighting a war. He doesn't need an army when he has arms that can hold her, and he's going to shoot arrows out of his eyes to catch her and all this sort of stuff. But he does admit that she sort of has an advantage over him, and he doesn't necessarily like that, but there's not much that he can do about it at this point. You know, the ball is in her court at this point, so he just sort of has to wait for her answer, and he's so enraptured by her. He can't really do anything else in the interim. But so at the very end, Lodovick comes back in and says, well, the guy with the drum was your son, Prince Edward. And Lodovick goes out, and Prince Edward comes in, and tomorrow we will dig into the conversation between father and son, as one is preparing for war, and the other's mind is elsewhere. I'll see you tomorrow for more. Mwah.